In this screencast, we'll see how to create a simple form in Ruby on Rails. First, we create a new Rails project. Create a new Rails folder. I call it Rails 3 here. Type Rails new simple form. Rails then creates a bunch of files and folders for you to use in your project going forward. Open your Rails project in your favorite text editor. Here I am using TextMate and I type in mate simple form. From the Rails root directory simple form, start the Rails server. The command to use is Rails space S. On the browser, type localhost colon 3000, which brings up your Rails application. Now we create a controller called students. This controller lets us create and update new student related information in our application. Rails creates a bunch of controller related files for us, one of which is students underscore controller. Next, we create a model called student. This model lets us save the student information that we create in our database. The controller and the model for student are linked together by the Rails framework. Observe that the student model has two fields, first name and last name, both of which are strings. Rails also creates an associated set of files for our student model, just like for students controller. Next, we ask Rails to actually create our database by typing in rake db migrate. We can check that this action has created a database table in our SQLite 3 database. As you can see here in the directory simpleform /db, go ahead and type in SQLite 3 development3.sqlite3 and it'll open that database, and you can type in the .schema command to view the table. The table here is the students table that's highlighted. We can now open the student underscore controller .rb file that we just created in our editor and start adding some methods to it. We add two new methods. The first method is called new and the second method is called create. We create a new student object and assign it to an instance variable called @student. The new method enables us to display a form to the user in which they can start entering new student information. But once they enter that information, to be able to save that information, we need the create method, which we are now about to define. We take the student parameters from the form that has been submitted and save it in a new @student instance variable. We then save the @student instance variable in the database using the save command, and if it does save, we redirect to the new controller method. We now create a new file called new.html.erb. This is a file that lets the user enter information about a student. It's a file that displays a form. We make use of a form helper called form_for, which makes use of the @student instance variable. We create one text field for the student's first name and one text field for the student's last name. And finally, we create a submit button. Here's a submit button. And we add some descriptive names for each of the text fields, first name and last name. Leave a gap there. Go to the config folder, there's a roots.rb file. We need to edit that to ensure that the proper roots show up in the URL box. Here we just add a resource called students, and that ensures that student related roots show up in the URL. And there's our first form, the first name, last name, create student, entering some information there. and that information does not show up on the website. That's because we have not yet configured it to show the information. Let's go to our database and see if that information has at least been saved. So the information did get saved. We go back to new.html.erb and write some code to actually display the information that we have saved. We make use of the Rails for loop. If um, the student's instance variable is not blank, then display for each student their first name and their last name. Put a line break after each name. Put a line break after the heading. You may want to notice that at the top in the form for, we use at student in the singular, but at the bottom, when retrieving information about all students, we use at students in the plural. And that's because we have several students that we want to retrieve. Back in the students controller, we create a new at students instance variable and we pull in all the students information from the database into this variable. Now, if we refresh the browser, we can actually see student names that we have saved. And that brings us to the end of this episode of how to create a simple form. So that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed the screencast. Please do leave us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you and have a great day.